Hello and welcome. Today I'm in the Tier 7 German battleship, the Gneisenau. And this is a match I played on the NA server. You see, at the end of last year there was the Arpeggio missions, and I wanted to get the Takao on the NA server. Unfortunately, I only had a Murmansk on the NA server, and the Takao missions required a Tier 6 ship or higher. So I had to grind up a line or buy a premium, but because I'm very stingy with buying ships or premium ships, well, I went with the German battleship line. I did buy some Santa presents to try to maybe get lucky on a premium ship, but unfortunately I did get one ship, but it was an M-Den, so that didn't really help, and at that point I didn't even need the 10-point captain the M-Den came with. I did get some dragon flags though, so I got a lot of captain experience from it. I even ended up getting a 15-point captain before I unlocked the Bismarck. I eventually got the Takao missions done, and I ended up playing something like 120 games or so. And something rather incomprehensible to me happened. I had something like over 80% win rate in the Gneisenau, 83%, and that was solo, not in divisions. I did play a few division matches, but only a few, not that many. So having 80+% solo win rate is quite ridiculous. I haven't really encountered anything like it, at least. I haven't noticed that I've encountered anything like it. And it's particularly odd to me because it was in the Gneisenau. It's not a ship I evaluated very highly at first. But on the EU server I had some insane damage done with her and ended up with one of the highest on the server. And, you know, it still performed well in other aspects as well for me. And on the NA server, I'm just winning all the time with this ship. And the biggest, oddity to me is that I just can't put my finger on why. I don't know what makes this ship just perform so well, but I guess it just jives very well with me. That's why I didn't really, even when I unlocked the Bismarck, I didn't actually switch over to her because I just wanted to finish the grind, as it was rather towards the end. And that's a first blood. Nice little hit though, as well. Maybe I'm just extra lucky with this ship, I don't know. She is a very good ship though, because she has good anti-air, she is fast, maneuverable, she has very good torpedoes. I think that her torpedoes are better than the the Tirpitz's, mainly because she has 3 torpedoes per launcher compared to the Tirpitz's 4. You see, with Tirpitz's 4, rather, torpedo reload depends on the amount of torpedoes you have per launcher, so having 3 per launcher is very useful, because it lowers the torpedo reload enough that often in many fights you can use those torpedoes twice instead of only once. And I think that's quite an advantage. Because you can, at like slightly longer range, drop torpedoes first and then later drop them at a closer range again, because the enemy often won't expect you to have torpedoes. So overall, this is standard battle on hotspot, so what I told my team is to be defensive. I know many people will argue against it, saying something like, oh, if you're aggressive, then, that'll also be good. You just have to play it well, but honestly, defending is easier than attacking. And do you really trust your teammates, the random teammates you get, to be good enough to attack properly? I don't. I definitely don't. So I think it's much better if we are on the defensive side. Yes, it might be boring, but my objective was to get as much experience as quickly as possible. But, still have, like, nice games, and winning is fun. So, especially at some point when I realized how well I've been doing, I figured that, yeah, I'll try to win slightly more. And, because of it, I kept telling my teams to just be defensive on standard battle. In domination it's different, because in domination you do need the cap zones, and to actually take them you need to go out and do something. But in standard battle, defending is definitely the right decision in my opinion. especially at this kind of middle tier, which is tier 7 and so, because people will often attack regardless, even like if your team doesn't attack, then the enemy team will attack, and that means because defending is easier, your team should have the advantage. Also, in regards to the Gneisenau, oh, by the way, torpedoes incoming. I ping my team on where the torpedoes came from, and I say, essentially tell my team that there's a destroyer there. You see, if RPF were in the game, then that destroyer probably would have been spotted, and she wouldn't have gone around to do this kind of stealth gameplay. By the way, our destroyer is actually doing exactly the same thing. And you see, those torpedoes completely missed, they didn't hit anything, and now we know that the ship is there. And honestly, that took like 6 minutes to do. It's a complete waste of time because it didn't work out, and even if it did work out, is it worth spending 6 minutes on it? I don't know, I don't think it is. And if RPF stops something like this, then maybe it's not all bad. Because this kind of stealth gameplay, in my opinion, is bad. I don't really want the teammates to see this. Now the question of course is, even if RPF is added, will people stop doing that? Probably not. But they might be slightly less encouraged to do so. Because this kind of sneaking around the map and trying to surprise somebody, I don't think it's a good idea. Because it's generally not going to work out well, and you spend so much time on it that you just leave your team kinda hanging for a long time. Same goes for our destroyer that's doing the same thing. But you know, regardless, enough talk about RPF. I think the skill, essentially what I want to say is that if RPF were to do these kinds of things only, then it would be a very good addition to the game in my opinion. But the problem with RPF isn't limited to that. RPF has other problems which many people ignore talking about for some inexplicable reason that I find much more problematic, but it's a very charged topic and I guess I really can't talk about it, considering every time I make comments about it on Reddit I get downvoted and called names. Anyways, I'm going back to defend again. It seems that only the New Mexico is left on the western side, so if we could finish her up, we only have to focus on the eastern side, and that's a good thing for us. By the way, if you notice actually, right now one of the enemies is actually not fighting. One of the enemy battleships is not spotted at all, which means that it's likely that that battleship is not actually engaging in any combat. And that's a pretty big mistake I see many people making. They put themselves into a position where they cannot fight enemies, which means that if both teams are sending 5 ships into battle, and one of your teammates is actually sitting behind an island or being too far away, then technically it's actually a 4 against 5. And this is something that often happens on maps like North, especially in ranked battles, because there's that big island in the middle on North in ranked, and often some of their allies or some of the enemies will position themselves in a way where they don't have a firing solution, they don't have a line of fire on enemies. Yet, your team is engaging them, so in those kinds of scenarios you are actually losing out on quite a bit of firepower. By the way, if you notice, the dispersion on my shells has been fairly good, right? Like, if you look at it, you go, oh, I wish I had this kind of dispersion. But the thing is that this is still German battleships. The dispersion is not that great. However, one of the reasons why... also, that's a nice close quarters expert. One of the reasons that I noticed is that I've actually not been aiming very well in the past on battleships, or well, any kinds of ships, but you mostly see this problem in battleships. Actually, you see the problem in cruisers a lot, but the dispersion on cruisers isn't big enough for this to be much of a big deal. You see, essentially I noticed that I don't aim very well, and actually most players don't aim very well. They essentially rely a lot on the aim assist in the game to have accurate shots, right? But if your shells aren't somewhere near the prediction line where the game predicts that the enemy ship is going to be at, then the problem is that the aim assist disengages and the game increases your dispersion. Like right now, did you just see all my shells spread out massively at the start and they all missed? That's because the point where I aimed at and actually fired is not near the predicted point where the Pensacola is going to be. Essentially, I didn't aim correctly. If you notice other times when I fire, all the shells are dispersing fairly close to one another. In those cases, the aim is correct. So if you actually notice how your shells are dispersing more or less, because if you don't aim accurately, your dispersion ends up being much higher. The idea is that that's actually the game trying to help you, because if you don't aim at the correct spot, then if the shells are laser accurate, they will 100% miss. If they have high dispersion, then they still have a chance of, you know, blooming out and still hitting maybe with one shell or so. So you can essentially tell, often at least, whether your aim is more or less correct. If a ship is not actually moving at a very good speed or is moving diagonally in some weird fashion, then it's often very, very difficult to actually land on the correct position that is predicted. So when you see these kinds of shots that are at, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 kilometers and you see like massive dispersion, that usually means that the person aiming screwed up in some way. They either aimed too low or too high, or too far in front, or not far in front enough, something like that. And that is actually something that players themselves are screwing up. The dispersion with the aim assist kicking in is not actually that bad in the game. It's just that players aren't aiming correctly. But because, you know, it still sometimes works out, they expect that, you know, this is just dispersion being dispersion and the game, you know, wanting to be RNG. When I actually realized that this was the case, it pretty much opened my eyes. I didn't, like, sure, of course there is RNG in play, like pretty big RNG, because ships are fairly small. You can still miss a ship by like 1 billion shells. But like right now, did you just see that? I did not aim at the correct point. I don't actually know where the correct point to aim at when the ship is moving like that is. But I definitely didn't aim at the correct point. Shells otherwise normally do not disperse that much. And actually this is why, you know, you find that people have trouble aiming at targets that are either going backwards slowly or being stationary. Also torpedoes incoming, so I'll dodge them, etc. And hopefully I'll be able to take care of this mid-ski. And this is why targets that are going very slowly forward, like right now, did you just see the dispersion was much better because the aim point was much better, and as a result I hit 3 shells. So Mitsuki is here, but because she already fired her torpedoes, this should be an easy fight. The torpedoes probably aren't going to hit, but they are going to lead her in a way. And my secondaries are doing some damage, but I'll use my main guns to try to finish her off. Oh, never mind. I guess I didn't really need to fire those main guns there, but then again my guns are gonna be turning for a while now, so it didn't matter. That's my second close quarters expert. So now, time to try to finish the Pensacola off. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that being defensive is a good, because it's easier to defend than attack, right? So being passive somewhat is alright. It's not the best, because the best idea is to be passive, and then at the right moment, by the way, this dispersion looked really bad, then at the right moment, but it was alright, because I only needed 1 shell hit, and that's a Kraken Unleashed. So, being defensive or passive is alright. However, what you really want to do is be passive, but then at the right moment, be aggressive. But many people screw that up and don't know the right timings. And I don't know them myself every time either, so it is what it is. So, often you find that people are passive enough, and that tends to work out for them. And this is why I kinda like people being somewhat passive if they're on my team. I say somewhat because if I feel that it's the right time to push, I would like them to come with me, but if they don't, I guess it's alright. But in this current situation, I'm not being passive, I'm being aggressive. And the reason is that I'm not actually trying to maximize, trying to win as hard as possible. If I try to win as hard as possible, I should 100% try to run away here. Because again, being defensive is easier. Let the enemy König fight for me. But I want the most experience possible, so I need to deal a lot of damage. And this means playing close quarters and trading my ship for the Gneisenau. You see, usually it's not a good plan to trade your ship for something like 1 against 2 enemy ships or 1 for 3. You need better trades to try to carry the game. But at this kind of point, because there were only 3 ships left, trading my ship against 1 ship is alright. I mean, I got something like 30 to 40,000 damage from that rush. And, you know, it's 4 against 1 now, so we're likely going to win anyway. And, I mean, you all know what's going to happen here. It's 1 carrier against a carrier, 2 battleships and 1 cruiser. There is no way that this carrier is winning this fight. It's not high enough tier to have enough planes to actually do so. So yeah, basically what I want to say is people tend to aim poorly, and then they think that dispersion is really bad in this game as a result. I aim poorly quite often as well, so I understand where they're coming from. It's just that if you want to aim, if you want to learn to aim better, you should try to find out what dispersion looks like if you aim correctly and what it looks like if you aim poorly. Anyways, I'll just skip to the end because this will take a... So, end of the game. And I would like to also mention that being defensive is easier than being offensive. Because you don't have to push with everybody, you just need to set up a defensive line. And when you're defending, you also have the advantage that enemies are coming towards you, which means that torpedoes on your side are more effective. So, 360,000 credits, almost 4,000 experience, Confederate, 2 close quarters experts, 1 First Blood, and 1 Kraken Unleashed. 133,000 damage, 50 shell hits, 4 torpedo hits, 7 planes shot down because the carrier really didn't detect me, and that's a good decision because the Gneisenau has fairly good anti-air. 6 ships sunk, that's half the team, which is a very good result, and this is the kind of stuff you need to do to carry because think about this current game. I sank 6 ships and I did 133,000 damage, yet it still came down to, I believe, 4 against 1? Or something like that at the end, so... Imagine if I wasn't here, our team probably wouldn't have done so well. Anyways, team score panel. I didn't get that much experience, 1773, because it was a tier 5 to 7 match and most of the enemies I shot at were tier 5, so they didn't give me that much experience. And I mean, look at the ships that we had left, Aoba, Ryujo, König. Only those 3 survived. So take me out of the picture and my team could have easily lost. Detailed report, well, this is the 133,000 damage, 85,000 with main batteries, 31,000 with torpedoes, that probably mostly was the rush at the end, all I think fully. 16,000 from secondaries, I guess a lot of it hit on the Mitsuki at close range. By the way, I did have manual secondaries here, so that helped a lot. And credits and XP, 278,000 profit, and like I said, 4,000 experience. So, if you liked this video, then like it. If you disliked it, then dislike it. And I would like to thank the Patreons and Patreon. Thank you very much for your continued support, Ultra Real. And I hope I see you guys next time.